And welcome to our first ever episode of Devil Dash here with Dash Sports TV. I'm Wills Rice, joined by Josh Eyraud here. We're going to be talking about all things ASU football and how COVID kind of derailed the Herm train and what was to be a really promising season for these Sun Devils. So we're just going to kick off right into it. And we're going to talk about how COVID took down the season and how the Pac-12 decided to move the football season back to spring. But really, is it realistic for ASU and the rest of the Pac-12 to play in the spring?
Wills, I don't really know if it's super realistic. They're listening to the medical doctors and they're trying to just listen to the people who know most about this topic, but there's so much unknowns. I mean, the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, along with Pac-12 commissioners, they say they're just listening to the medical doctors, and I mean, it's just tough.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it just as a season alone, I think it's realistic to play in that spring season. But I mean, you got to look at it as, like we talked about, the big picture. I mean, is it realistic for these kids to play in the spring, turn around, have that off season right then and there, and then go out and play another full schedule in the fall? I mean, you got to look at the ways of the NFL draft. I mean, the players want to play that. They're hurting on their body. It could affect their draft stock. But you also got to look at it in the positive ways. I mean, look at someone like Joe Burrow, who, probably would have been a 5th-round pick going into last year. If he could get a full season like that, you could really skyrocket your draft stock. So, I mean, I think it's realistic, but there's still so many question marks that remain. We saw the schedules that were potentially out. We could do probably an all Pac-12 schedule in the spring, but then it begs the question of, is it a legit championship? We talked about there's Big Ten and Pac-12, but what if the college football playoff this year? I mean, is Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Georgia? Is anyone gonna question that's not a legitimate championship? It begs the question, because will they then play in the spring if they do crown a rightful champion? I don't know. It's something that begs to be asked.
The thing is, these players they're gonna think about this. They're gonna go into the spring season. They're gonna play a couple of games. Their draft stock's high. They have an option to redshirt and basically put this whole season, in the background, because they have the draft coming up, and then they could do it all over again. I mean, there's so much unknown right now. It's just ridiculous.
But when you look at it that way, redshirting for a whole season when you can go pro and make millions instantly, it kind of begs the whole college basketball argument of, do you stay next year, try to gain your draft, make it go up your draft stock, or do you want to go early and make those millions? You're risking injury playing another, waiting a whole another year, and there's certain players on ASU that are chomping at the bits for that chance. We have the Frank Darby, who's been sitting in the shadows of Brandon Ayuk and N'Keal Harry, and then we have a hungry Jaden Daniels who's trying to make his draft stock go up. Because in 2 years there's a few quarterbacks that could be in the first round taken. He's very likely could be one of them. There's a lot of things regarding ASU. They're a young team. We just had one of our best recruiting classes ever. There was a very promising season and a very hopeful one, but it's just so hard to expect these kids. As a fan, we all want to see football, but it's just not realistic. I mean, I think to expect these kids to play two seasons in a calendar year is just ridiculous. And what do you think the expectations for these kids should be?
I mean, I'm not sure, but I know one good thing that has come out of this season. Let's face it, the NCAA college sports, they've known over the past couple of years, things have been brought into light. They've been known to be a money hungry, always after the money aspect, not looking after their players, thinking about their safety. I think, at least with the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, a couple of other smaller conferences, they're doing the right thing in that light. Pursuing the season would have supported the fact that they are always after that money, which is, think about how many media deals they have with these broadcast companies, everything about it. But as you were saying with Jaden, I don't know about Jaden being a Heisman.
We'll get to that later. But
a little early.
With the spring football season, I mean, it's just there's so many question marks. I can't even tell you. I'm sure it's happened before, but I know they were talking about the last time a Rose Bowl has ever been played not at UCLA at the Rose Bowl was played actually at Duke. And you look back in the history books and it's like, wow, there's a Rose Bowl played at Duke, and I think it was a similar situation to this where the Rose Bowl wasn't going to happen at the same time, and they did it elsewhere. But I mean, it's so interesting that if they do play these Pac-12 only schedules, would they still have a Rose Bowl in the spring? I mean, there's so many question marks, and with safety, we've seen the Pac-12 and the Unity group with their questions and all of that. Before we can even have a season this fall, I think there's still so many more question marks. I mean, we see the SEC, they're full steam ahead with Ed Orgeron being the head of that, and it's just you can't really say decisively that our players are staying safe. Colleges all around the country opened back up last week and this week, and will be continuing to open back up. And these are kids, these young kids, the Chad Johnson Juniors, the Bunkley Sheltons. These are guys that are 18 years old, and they're checking into one of the biggest party schools in the country and one of the biggest, just population-wise, the biggest population-wise country in the country. And you can't blame these kids for trying to be social, everyone. Like, you really can't. They're college kids. They need to make friends. They're not going to sit in their dorm room and only be friends with their football friends. And that's nationwide. That does not just involve ASU. And that's something that just as a coach, as an organization, I think the Pac-12, the Big Ten did it right by delaying the season. But I question how much they did this to, kind of satisfy the fans. Here's not your full meal, but here's a little appetizer of what could be. And do they really? My question is, do they really think that the spring is going to be more successful? That we're going to have a cure for this by then, and everything's going to be all. I mean, maybe we could have it contained, and the numbers will be down. But if the same reasons you postponed the season this year or to the spring, I really don't think that those issues are going to be solved 100% by the spring. And if you truly believe that this is about those players' safety, I mean, how can you send them out there in the spring again?
I mean, I think it's a facade right now. I mean, the higher ups of these organizations are, just pushing delay. They need more time to figure out the situation. I feel like Pac-12 might have called it a little bit early, but you know what? Someone's got to take that step. Someone's got to plant their foot in the ground and be like, look, this is the right thing to do. We don't know enough about the coronavirus and what it's going to be like in 6 months, but I know there is hope.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, there's hope. I mean, all fans want there to be hope. No one wants to hear that there's no chance for a college football season. I mean, the players we've seen the hashtag We Want to Play movement. But again, they're probably, if you realistically, I know college sports are changing, especially football, and I don't think they're ever going to be the same as we knew it last year. Players are going to make money. Players, I mean, especially with the risk that they have to take. I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, probably next year, but I mean, we've seen the Pac-12 Unity Group wanted, I want to say it was a little over $200,000 per person. And, from unpaid athletes to this, I think the Pac-12, Big Ten, everything is going to change. I mean, the SEC I think the estimated value per player was close to $350,000, and that doesn't include the big name players, the Tuas, the Isaiah Simmons, players like that. Those are. It's going to be. It's not even COVID question marks at this point. They've a topic we wanted to talk about was the Pac-12 Media Group. They wanted the safety. They felt, UCLA was a big thing. We saw UCLA hire an outside outside health organization. So they would make sure that their practices were all falling under the COVID guidelines. And I think there's more questions that need to be answered other than COVID. And the question is like, can these players be safe, and will they go out there, and if they aren't potentially 100% safe, will they have these guarantees that if they do get COVID or if they do get hurt, that they're going to have insurance or some sort of plan set in place? And talking about the Unity Group, a lot of players have been unhappy. And the big thing is, is ASU has been, flying under the radar. We've seen a lot of the Pacific Northwest schools been unhappy. But on the Pac-12 Unity Group, there's 0 players that ASU named. And they do have a spokesperson that if players do have issues, he's been named on the list, but he has not voiced any concerns. And the big question is Herm Edwards and the coaching staff to credit for not the success, I would not call this a success, but for, the players and the team all being on one specific page and, having one mindset as a team.
I for sure think that Herm Edwards is one of the main driving reasons behind this. I mean, I feel like that's kind of Herm's motto is, they're going to, as a team, they're going to make one decision. I feel like that's something that Herm could very, very much do in the locker room, and he easily could have went through with that. And, I mean, it's just a testament to, like, it's not even about, like, the coaches, like, having everybody on the same page. It's like, I feel like is it really, like, the time to, criticize the NCAA amongst all this coronavirus stuff? Like, is it the right time to be, lashing out and, asking for change during this coronavirus, especially for the NCAA?
It's tough. I mean, I think the NCAA needs to change. I mean, you can see how the universities have been, trying to throw out these players onto the field because of the amount of money they're losing. And that's a huge issue. I mean, we're not D1 athletes, but if we were, it's like, it's really, you can see that they don't care. Like they want the money, it could be devastating to a lot of non-Power 5 football conferences, like 1 year of not having college football. So I think the demand for change really is here, but I think what this speaks to is that the reason Herm got hired here was, Ray Anderson didn't even interview anyone else. People wanted Les Miles here. There's a lot of names getting thrown out at the time. And he interviewed one guy, which was his guy. And everyone threw the question marks. I mean, he hadn't been a coach in forever. He'd been an analyst on ESPN. Even when he was a coach, he wasn't a great coach. And there's a lot of question marks. But I think what needs to be said about this is the hiring goes way beyond the football field. Herm Edwards is like one of the things I've heard about Herm, and I truly believe, is that he's a leader of men. He's not a leader of players onto the football field. It's like, when you're a parent, you want your kid playing for Herm Edwards. And I think this is a great example of this. He's reaching out to the team. His staff is reaching out to the team, and they're getting input from everywhere saying, like, what can we do for you as players? And I think that's a huge reason to why, obviously every player is going to want to get paid. That's a big thing. I mean, who doesn't want to get paid? If you don't have to do anything else, you just have to go out and play and you're going to get paid. Hell yeah, I want to get paid. But, I think the ASU players realize that it's more than that. It's more than just pay. And I think they realize that Herm Edwards, Marvin Lewis, Antonio Pierce, and this model of pro coaching staff, they care about their players, and they know that to be in the NFL, you have to be more than just a player. You have to be a man. You have to be a leader. You can't be a coward off the field. And I think that's where Ray Anderson really needs to get more props. I mean, Ray Anderson went out and made this hire, no questions asked. And I know you want to talk about Ray Anderson, but there was a few years ago, there's a lot of question marks regarding ASU sports as a whole. And now look at it, obviously there's no sports this year. We potentially could have had 2 top 20, if not top 15 teams on our campus this year. And I think it really speaks to ASU athletics and the people they've put in place to reach out to these student athletes, because we're now seeing that although the success really hasn't been there, yeah, we beat a bad Florida State team in a bowl game last year, but although the success really hasn't been there, you can see the progress being made on and off the field, whether it's, the renovations, whether it's these kids that, getting first round draft picks, even though they weren't, necessarily all Americans on the field. It says, we're getting the better recruiting classes, and it speaks volumes to the job Ray Anderson at the top and on down through Herm Edwards and the staff he's put together. I mean, it's pretty incredible how there's so many issues going on in the world right now. And then in this Pac-12 Unity Group, there wasn't one ASU player on it. And I really, that just has to speak volumes to the type of coach Herm Edwards is and the staff he has.
Yeah, and quick little fact about ASU football and wanting that money. ASU football $39 million in the 2018-2019 season, 65% of the total sports revenue. But like you're saying, I think for football, it all starts with Herm. I mean, Herm is that guy. He's a culture. He started a culture at ASU. And think about this. He influences the top players on the team, the leaders of the team, and everybody else looks up to them. So props to Herm, Marvin Lewis, like you guys said, Antonio Pierce. Those guys have what it takes to lead a team and coach these young men.
And another thing about Herm that I really like what you said he builds leaders. And I think a way that Herm succeeds as a coach is, he has these captains that he relies on, whether it's we've seen freshmen, we've seen seniors. We saw a backup quarterback last year be a captain. That's unheard of, let alone at a Power 5 school. It's ridiculous, but he notices these leaders, and I think that's how the players respect him. He doesn't micromanage every single player on the field, but he knows these players know what they're talking about. These guys know how to lead, and he lets his players lead by example. And I think that's a really powerful tool as an athlete that helps recruiting. You want to play for someone like that, where if you make a mistake or see someone else, you can help be the coach. And another player is going to respond better to criticism from another player rather than probably the head coach, where he might be a little scared he's going to lose his job, something like that. And I think it's just the entire staff they've put together has been incredible. But that doesn't speak to just the staff. I think it also speaks to the students. I mean, that it goes both ways. That the coaching staff has to do that difficult job of putting up with being on the same page with the students. But at the same time, the athletes have the maturity to recognize the point of where we're at for football season, off the field, and all that. And they've also worked that communication out with the team. We're going to talk about him next, but Jaden Daniels has been an incredible leader for this team. He hasn't really been all over Twitter. We've seen a lot of people, the Trevor Lawrences and stuff, tweeting about it and trying to take action. But I think they haven't been in the news. I think that speaks to how they've communicated as a team and as an organization.
Yeah, and you said coaching staff when you're referring to ASU, and I feel like you hit it right on the head on the nail. I mean, it's not just Herm Edwards. It's the surrounding factors, people that are with him every day, giving him the other insight, stuff he doesn't hear. It's things like that just, it's everyone. It's teamwork, literally, not just one person.
And he's put together a lot of ex-players that, aren't really major coaches, but, players that, like I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on his Mike Bercovici. He's one of the quarterbacks coaches now, and he was an ASU legend, if you will. It's just a lot of things like that where he really is finding a good way to connect with his players. And then he's also getting young and upcoming coaches such as Prentice Gill from Oregon, who we stole just right from under their noses, and one of the best hirings, I think, of his staff. And then instantly got a 4-star recruit that flopped from Oregon from Prentice Gill. And I just really think if COVID season in the spring or not, ASU with Jane Daniels at the helm under Herm Edwards for the next hopefully 2 seasons, but maybe one more of Jane Daniels in his junior year, is going to be huge for ASU as a program. And you love to see as a fan and just as a spectator that the players aren't frustrated. I mean, it's just really satisfying. These players are genuinely happy. But transitioning over, we have the Jane Daniels talk as a leader, as a player. He had a great freshman season. But what we want to talk about is he a legitimate Heisman contender?
Yes, he is, but I'm not on the Jaden train yet. I'm sorry, Wills.
Oh, man.
But hey, it is what it is. He's a sophomore. He needs to put on some weight. This man, I feel like, here's the bottom line. If Jaden Daniels wants to, enter himself legitimately into the Heisman race, Heisman talk, I feel like he needs to use his feet a little bit more. He needs to throw the ball a little bit better and just be on his feet more.
I mean, it's a great point. I was surprised when looking up his stats as a whole from last year. It's hard to look at it and be like, wow, he had less than 400. He had less than 400 yards rushing last year, and it's like you really thought he was more successful on his feet. But you got to realize, as a freshman, his decision making was fantastic. The 2 interceptions as a pocket passer, his poise in the pocket of when to leave, he could sense that pressure coming from his blind side. And we've seen 3 years of Manny Wilkins. Man, that guy would either stay 45 seconds too long in the pocket or he would leave before the ball was even snapped in his hands. And as a fan, it's just like you never let plays develop. You never let the coaches call plays for you. And really coming in from a freshman, was fantastic. And we got a question. Which sport will be the first to play a game this school year? That's tough. For ASU, I mean, it will probably be something that doesn't involve a lot of contact. I want to say one of the major ones they were talking about were football, basketball, and cross country were, I think, the 3 that they were first to get axed. I want to say sports that they were hoping for were like tennis. Swimming was potentially one of them because there's not any really contact in swimming. You could space out lanes potentially if you needed to. But it's hard to tell with what sports are going to be good because it's hard for a school to say, hey, college football is all good to go, but, hey, tennis, sorry, your season's canceled. It's hard to say that. So I don't know if it's necessarily going to be one individual sport or a whole total of sports. But back to the Jane Daniels talk. We have his stats right in front of us. 60% completion, 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 355 rushing yards, and he notched 3 top 25 wins, including at Michigan State and home against Oregon that ultimately ruined Oregon's college football playoff hopes. They would have been in with the win over ASU, and Jane Daniels simply outplayed Justin Herbert. But you think you're not on the train. What are some other names? Let's count out this season. Let's go next year where there's no Trevor Lawrence, no Justin Fields. Who do you think are some other names that are going to be competing against Jane Daniels?
Well, the first name that comes to mind, you take out Trevor Lawrence out of the ACC, Sam Howell.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if he's a sophomore or a junior, but he's quarterback at UNC.
Yep.
This man can throw the ball, and he's got weapons. Watch out for him. He's a dirty player. He's filthy.
Well, and people fail to realize with him is Mac Brown is putting a great program around UNC. I mean, that program has only gone up, and Mac Brown, wherever he goes, Texas is one of the best dynasties ever. Wherever he goes, he wins. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Howell does under Mac Brown. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but if you have some.
I got another Pac-12 player for you, and this was brought to my attention. Bruce Feldman, read him on The Athletic. Penei Sewell, an offensive lineman, plays for Oregon. He's a junior. He's got some high praise from Mario Cristobal. He says he's one of the best he's ever coached. I mean, that guy has coached a lot of pros, a lot of good players. He knows what he's talking about. This kid can – I just watched some film on him about 30 minutes ago. He can throw these kids right on the ground.
And when you're talking about Heisman, it's almost impossible to, talk about an offensive tackle for Heisman. It's, it's never been done. But I think when you bring out names like that, it's like, yeah, they might not get the national praise. They might not get invited to New York, but that's a guy that very well and probably will be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So if you're a team that, your team's projected to be bottom 5 and bottom 7 and you need line help, this is a guy that in the Pac-12, every game you're going to want to watch. The pancake blocks, the swings, the pulls, everything he does is swift. He's a massive human being. He is a 18-wheeler of a human being coming down when he's trying to block you, and it's someone that you do not want to get in the way. We saw it at ASU. He had a fantastic game against ASU last year, and it's someone as a sophomore last year, junior this year. Obviously, his season is pushed to the spring. Someone you're only going to watch out for. But we failed to mention with talking about Heisman candidates, we kind of touched over it with the draft. If you're an incoming junior, you have to stay 3 years in college. If you're an incoming junior, do you go early or do you kind of want, if you're on an Oregon, do you want to come back for that national championship run? And that's something that really could twist up the Heisman talk in 2 years. You never know if, let's say Trevor Lawrence wouldn't be going pro, but I'm trying to think of a big name that in this upcoming NFL draft is escaping me as quarterbacks. But
Justin Fields.
Justin Fields is also a sophomore this year, so. Or he did red shirt. I'm not sure how the whole red shirts go, but is he going to be? I'm drawing a blank with the drafts, but and the whole red shirt eligibility. But like I said, you never know if someone comes back. We've watched Brock Purdy at Iowa State. I mean, that's somebody that's probably not going to go pro, but him benefiting under a 4th year, something that can really, really shake up the Heisman looks. And someone like Brock Purdy, what is another probably quarterback or position player that you look for? In the NCAA, you mentioned Sam Howell. We talked about Jaden Daniels, maybe in the Pac-12, maybe outside, but that could be another Heisman candidate.
Well, there's a quarterback out of USC. His name's Keaton Slovis. He's pretty good. Keaton Slovis, he's pretty good. I mean, he's from Arizona. He's pretty. It's going to be tight. I mean, the schedule is up in the air. It's ridiculous.
And it's something to watch for when it comes to Heisman stats. I mean, Keaton is right now probably a higher prospect than Jaden Daniels and has higher odds Heisman-wise. But the way the NFL has been going is, they want those running quarterbacks. The last quarterbacks taken have been Kyler Murray, has been Baker Mayfield. Not necessarily run-first quarterbacks, but quarterbacks that can run. I think that's interesting with Jaden Daniels because he can run, but he showed that he's not a running quarterback like an RG3, if that makes sense. So, and we just got word that Justin Fields is going to be a junior this year, so he can go pro. So it would be interesting to see, maybe next year if he does come back, or if try to win that national championship that they feel they are robbed of this year against Clemson. So it's going to be interesting to watch out for. But Keaton Slovis is he's in an air raid offense. He's got so many weapons at wide receiver U at USC. I mean, that's something that if he can capitalize on that opportunity, man, that's going to be a good Heisman candidate for lower value rather than your Trevor Lawrence or your Justin Fields. But the thing about Keaton is that he's a story that you have to love. I mean, 3-star recruit, kind of came in as the third option for USC last year. You see that USC starting quarterback go down first game.
Got thrown right in the fire.
Yeah, and then he'd actually beaten out Jack Sears as the backup quarterback. And Jack Sears is someone that ASU fans know well. He came to ASU, I believe, not this most recent season, but 2 years ago, and he put up, I want to say, close to 500 yards against us, and it was I can't remember the exact game, but he played a good game. Oh, it was in LA, sorry. And he was a great player. And you see this true freshman come to LA in the bright lights and beat him out and make him the third string quarterback. It's like, okay, who is this guy? You see him thrown in the Fresno State game, and he did throw a lot of interceptions this year, but it's kind of something that's expected as someone as a true freshman that's thrown right into the fire. His progression as his next season is going to be something really fascinating to watch. 3-star recruit really didn't have a ton of offers, but USC is really all you need with that history. And it's Jaden Daniels versus. It's really disappointing we were stripped of that matchup this year, but we could have gotten 2 more years. We saw last year Keaton Slovis beat us. I think they scored 4 touchdowns in the first quarter, and they never looked back. It was tough, but that was a great game, and we could have had at least seen 2 more matchups of that. Whether Jaden Daniels is a legit Heisman candidate is yet to be seen, but it's definitely he is putting his name out there as one of the premier quarterbacks in college football, and I think he's ready. He's ready for that challenge to take on Keaton Slovis and the rest of the Pac-12. And we're about to wrap up. Do you have any closing thoughts on ASU football? What the season could look like as a whole, or anything else like that?
I got a question for you. If say there's no spring, no fall, gets moved back a year, everybody red shirts. Is Keaton Slovis playing time going to be affected by our old friend JT Barrett at all?
Probably not. I mean, I don't think he transferred. I think he originally threw his name in the transfer portal, but I don't think he did transfer. I think that's really Keaton's job to lose. I think it really is Keaton's job to lose. He showed last year that they had all those injuries, and he didn't really that offense didn't take a step down. They were kind of it's questions whether they could have been better at JT Daniels, but it's, why not give that true freshman a start? He's your future. You have extra time with him. And, you never know if we don't have a year. I'm pretty sure JT Daniels was a sophomore last year, so he's going to be a junior. Could potentially go pro. So it's something you have to look out for, and just all the question mark. Oh, sorry. And, yeah, we were both wrong. He transferred to Georgia. It shows our USC knowledge over here, as we are big ASU fans. But we want to thank you all for joining us today on Devil Dash. We are at Dash Sports TV on all social medias: Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, everything. We're dashsports.tv on the website, And for Wills Rice, I'm Josh Eyraud. We have plenty of content coming up. If you want to talk about any Pac-12 sport, jump in. We have the schools all across the Pac-12, and we will be producing content weekly, and we look forward to seeing you on future weeks to come.